by which a nightmare can be avoided. At the same time, we can accept some risks are inevitable and can be avoided. One scenario for an avoidable catastrophe does not mean that we cannot tell the difference between some catastrophic risks and everyday risks, or the alternative makes no risk calculations ever. That's a bad way to approach the world. People start smoking cigarettes or having unprotected sex or walking through a field of landmines. If you're on the DMZ, because I'm all like without anxiety and shit, our chain and Trackman evidence proves that the alternative cannot solve and impact turns the idea that we should be totally open to a deliberalized immigration system that causes a nativist backlash that creates worse forms of depression and anxiety. The immigrant only temporary migratory programs can solve. You should do the plan and engage in existential anxiety analysis. Only the permutation can solve. You should cross-apply the analysis I did about how if they don't reject the entirety of the visa system, it proves that the alternative can't solve, or only the permutation can. Now, their alternative author who votes affirmative Suazo. And two, we are not to be deterred in the present situation. For the end of philosophy comes also the task of thinking long held to reserve now. Do be undertaken in wide, more ritual disrequires that we contemplate the prison fundamentally, that we do listen to the determination and analysis, we get the destiny of human which has not been said and what we must do on the basis of real guys into the future of the present age for heading this thinking ahead is a thinking curve the most fundamental achievement. Thinking is not an activity but the very action which is in a dialogue with the world's destiny, the action, the authentic doing of the thinker, but of the political thinker, particularly insofar as humanity is ever manifest in the historical political configuration of age scenarios like the one I see escape the track of economic security. This is the card that Jacob started reading that will finish now. Variety, seeing the unrelated economic, technological, competitive, political, societal information that translated framework for judgment in a way that no model could help able to help the nation's condition work clearly. The different futures that may occur to operate the uncertain world. We need to receptive the question, our assumption about how the world works as we do not look for the future, destined to make mistakes, and to be able to understand the future. We have a mental map flexible enough to consider possible alternatives, possible that we might not otherwise consider predictions work, then prevent extinction. This is Bostrom 2. Humankind may be approaching critical phase chances of nuclear holocaust, transforming technology present whether we have a future to determine how we deal with these existential risks, clearly understand the threat which will enable us to formulate better strategies. There are some subject probable errors cannot be trial and error. There's no opportunity to learn. We must anticipate new threats, take decisive preventative action. Our fear response is still calibrated to that magnitude. We need to know where to focus. We would benefit from detailed understanding of causal factors, comparing predictions for our observation. We have probabilistic evidence. Essential probability having an existential disaster will do us and may be considerably higher. We need more research. Existential risk, public awareness will be built up. Also, fear doesn't cause numbing inaction, but does only specific policy solutions are able to solve their impact. Statement of Plenty 86 main obstacle to action is neither apparent, is neither apathy nor terror, but hopelessness can lead to psychic numbing. Those who feel powerless to prevent nuclear war try not to think about messages to hope. Break this vicious cycle appeals most to people who feel positive about contribution. Nuclear weapons campaign attracted at least factor because it offered hope. Whether people will do something like that, teach a belief that the plan will reduce the danger, confidence in their ability, and changing thinking, addressing root cause questions, fails, material changes are the best form of risk reduction. Like 87 nuclear depth psychologists and policymakers of the problem of nuclear conflict risk very differently impact almost inverse the arguments of the depth psychologists are relevant to the management of nuclear risk formulations, and prescriptions of nuclear depth psychology are relevant and are likely to remain so the two most important determinants of our thinking, biological drive and the social strength of the nation states system have evolved to soften the impact the aggressive and destructiveness inherent in our biology. Psychologists should turn their attention to crisis that may spiral into a nuclear war. Will probably seem a strategy of too little too late. Then their lessons for psychologists seeking to contribute to the reducing the risk of nuclear war. Therefore, not to stop worrying about it, but rather to begin worrying about the potentially policy relevant ways focusing on crisis, and also to realize that this is not necessarily the doomed enterprise that it may seem now. Also there's no impact in life because it can't be so, because it cannot be determined sort of objectively. Rather, it's a subjective determination. Extinction would probably be worse for value life because there's sort of no means by which you could sort of reverse that, and it's probably impossible also to re-analyze your subjectivity in that world. Now, also permutation do both. Now the Deleuze and Coterie critique permutation do both. Permutation do they plan to begin with it. It would begin with a change in a way. Change in a way that desire is invested. Also, what I see as an impact to this argument because it's a sort of 8 minutes of reasons why desire for economic superiority is something that's inevitable and good. It also doesn't turn the case of no specific evidence. Also, probably able to solve that. Also, structural, historical, and technological forces make talent competition inevitable. Michael's and neither more fatality persists. Three fundamental forces fuel the war fatality irreversible shift from industrial to information age intensify and demand for high caliber managerial ground prosperity switch company structural forces divide the war fatality area and widespread the
exculpatory argument, you make a competition inevitable argument. I'm wondering how your sort of global community that doesn't have to do with territorial borders somehow overcomes this idea.
Well, I think you're conflating, yeah, I think you sort of have a misunderstanding of the advantages, which is just that it's not that like these transnational networks prevent sort of economic competitiveness everywhere, but rather that transnational social linkages can sort of prevent violent state-led nationalism. That's not to say that states won't compete economically, but rather we also make claims in the 2AC that economic competitiveness
so they
is
just
sort of the
curb
best
the worst
form.
effects of that competition? Is that your argument?
It like prevents like random lashing out violence.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Explain to me what this sort of transnational network looks like.
Sure. Our Castle's evidence describes diasporic communities as basically enclaves of sort of non-national or non-natives in the United States and other countries like China and India.
Like, we're totally part of the same world.
They're just like
how does this work?
It's just immigrant communities in the United States and other countries.
Oh.
What do you mean? They're not natives. They're born other places. They come here on
That's
temporary work
interesting,
visas.
because your Chandler evidence seems to be an attempt to criticize the territorial system, but repeatedly throughout the 1AC, you notion that these people are from a homeland. You say these people are from a certain state. They are not natives.
Our Chandler evidence is decidedly affirmative because it says that transnational networks are sort of a middle ground between traditional notions of territoriality based on the nation state, but also it's also not that they're like landless peoples.
Okay.
They have a very sort of distinct identity.
Sweet. Swazo evidence that you read.
Yeah, we say territory is
It says
good.
in this evidence that the kind of thinking ahead is not prophetic pretensions. In what part of this evidence are you drawing an affirmation of the sort of prediction of consequences that you're trying to justify?
I think you just read like sort of a half sentence from that card, which is actually pretty long, but this evidence says that sort of thinking ahead and predicting potential scenarios for catastrophic action is not,
where does it say
degrade
that?
identity.
I get that it says rethinking or thinking is good and it's not an inaction, but where does it say that that means that we should make
this action? So it says that it says thinking is not inactivity, but very action. This action is the authentic doing of the thinker, the political thinker in particular, insofar as human destiny is ever manifested in the configuration of
I
its
didn't
age.
care anything about political consequences in that.
Well, he's just saying that thinking ahead and sort of calculating risk is not something that's
Where
necessarily
does it say
inauthentic.
calculations in that piece of evidence?
You're right. It's not like the affirmative
Because in the
calculation is
context of
good,
our
but
act,
right.
The alternative to that is sticking your head in the sand.
Yeah.
And that card says
Right, which
sticking
is
your
sort
head
of-
in the sand is stupid. And
Okay,
it's
Which is
on that
the
point, you make the claim later that state action is key, that we shouldn't have this type of individual response. That evidence seems to be a reason why the alternative is not inaction in the political sense.
This is sort of this isn't a sort of, I mean, it is defense against the all, but that's not the primary argument he's making, just saying that predictions are something that are good.
Okay.